Homer's treasured Mr. Plow jacket, and these Power Ranger underoos, which I'm already wearing.
I didn't have a clip that showcases the main thesis of this video essay, but Power Rangers and The Simpsons, that's the video! Flanderization, a term coined from the long-running animated show, The Simpsons. I believe it's an important term in explaining another long-running show, Power Rangers. Its meaning? To take the most basic traits of a character and inflating it to the point where it's their sole personality. Take its namesake, Ned Flanders. He started off as a well-meaning, perfect neighbor as a foil to Homer Simpson, but instead he was Flanderized into a religious fundamentalist Bible thumper.
We're not going to church today.
What? You give me one good reason.
It's Saturday!
Both Power Rangers and The Simpsons started out on Fox, with a later run-in with a certain mouse. Both shows have had an impressive longevity in the entertainment space with their pop culture influence and sheer episode count. If I'm being honest, The Simpsons has very little to do with this video, but Flanderization is an idea that's been rattling in my head every time I watch Power Rangers. When it comes to the famous Yellow family, a common sentiment is that newer episodes of The Simpsons aren't as good as the old ones.
Hello, I'm Elon Musk.
Die!
What the?
I'm sure Power Rangers fans know what that's like.
I can't help myself!
Flanderization is typically a label given to characters, but something I feel also describes non-character elements of Power Rangers, even the show itself. And like The Simpsons and Power Rangers, if you want this channel to run for years to come, please consider subscribing. If this video does well, I don't know, maybe I could talk about Power Rangers and Family Guy. I touched on this a bit in a previous video about how the show is being held back, but this will be a bit more of an expansion on that.
I redecorated using the Hello Kitty expansion pack.
No!
Why do I think the show's Flanderized? 2 words, Mighty Morphin.
Oh, shit. Here we go again.
Yeah, we're treading this territory again, but I want to go less into how they're structuring the show and more into why the show's been Flanderized into its outdated 90s identity. If we look back at the definition of the word that I gave, it's about inflating basic traits of a character far beyond any other characterization they may have.
This adventure is better than any video game.
Looking at a different show, Cosmo and Wanda from the original Fairly OddParents started off as hopeless romantics before becoming a bog-standard bickering couple. Cosmo went from witty and loving to an idiot. Wanda was reduced to nag, nag, nag. Shout out to the new show, they kind of fixed it. But we're not talking about the individual characters, we're talking about the whole show! So before I answer the why, just how has Power Rangers been Flanderized?
Cohen doodly
Diddly
diddly,
oodly,
doodly doddly,
oodly,
tick a
loony
doodly,
oodly,
noodly doddly,
diddly
diddly
oodly,
doddly, shut the
loony oodly.
diddly daddler Utner.
Every aspect of the show since 2011 was blatantly geared to replicate Mighty Morphin. This includes the writing becoming more simple to mimic the episodic nature of the original. Explicit nods including the same Go-Go Power Rangers terminology and iconology recycled. Reusing the same character archetypes in a soulless bland rehash, such as having a comedic relief duo echoing Bulk and Skull, and mandates from above the writers' heads to keep the show more in line with Mighty Morphin. It's Power Rangers. It looks like it, feels like it, and the title of the show is still the same. But have you ever written an essay to meet the minimum word count? I know I have. There's a difference between making something for the sake of making it and making something because you actually care to do something with it. Power Rangers in the last few years wasn't trying to make a show with a strong story and characters that can support itself. It's trying to make a show that can check boxes and passes as Power Rangers. Now, checking boxes isn't inherently a bad thing if those boxes were things like strong character dynamics or interesting plot threads that recur throughout the season. We'd be fine. These are elements from a period of growth in Power Rangers' long run that makes the seasons that growth happened in so beloved. But instead, these checkboxes are based off the series' first and biggest financial success, Mighty Morphin. But the important thing to go over is why, and how in some ways Flanderizing Power Rangers into its Mighty Morphin roots may be necessary. It's all about perception. Tell me, what do you think of when you see these 5 colors? Was your first guess Power Rangers? Well, how about if I put these characters here? These are a mix of Marvel and DC characters, but the color association is ingrained in your head as Power Rangers. When it comes to brand recognition, recurring elements are a great way to establish that different properties are related. If you were to boil down any season of Power Rangers, you would find the most basic elements that make up the franchise. The important thing to consider is, when the show first exploded into popularity, it was Mighty Morphin that did it. Not Lost Galaxy, not Time Force, not Jungle Fury, Mighty Morphin. That came with a downside. While it wrote rules for what you can expect from typical Power Rangers fare, multicolored heroes, live-action fights, and giant robot kaiju sequences, people are attached to the original. They have a bias for it. If you ask general audiences the same question I asked you, they'd simply answer with, oh, Power Rangers. And they're more than likely thinking of Mighty Morphin, but the same color sequence applies to In Space, Operation Overdrive, and Megaforce. It's just the answer with the least mental gymnastics that you'd have to go through because it's the first one that pops into your head. The public perception is only on the first iteration of the show. Most audiences do not care to distinguish the seasons because those seasons have not broken past the pop culture bubble that Mighty Morphin created. It's because of this that people in charge of the show believe they're strong-armed into catering for it. Mighty Morphin is an easy way to take advantage of a built-in audience. It brings in the crowds, but just getting them in the door isn't enough, which is where catering to Mighty Morph-stalgia falls flat.
I mean, the outfits are cool and everything, but my hair gets all tangled up inside the helmets.
I'm not so sure. The helmet does mess up my hair.
The show's grown throughout its 3 decades on television, but towards the end, it stunted itself by deciding to throw out that growth in exchange for cheap Mighty Morphin bait. All because the audience perceives the show as only Mighty Morphin, and that the creators themselves perceive the audience as only liking Mighty Morphin and not wanting more from that. It's all about perception. Because there's this perception, some may call it a belief, that the show can only be successful with Mighty Morphin, executives will blindly point to it as the blueprint for success.
I've narrowed your choices down to 5 unthinkable options.
I picked number 3.
You don't even want to read them first?
Let me actually go back on that slightly. They don't blindly do it. It's backed up with data and merch sales. Mighty Morphin fans are simply the most vocal because there's an overwhelming amount of them. With the current state of television, shows get canceled left and right. We don't have the luxury of 30-plus episode seasons. It was a miracle Power Rangers got 20-episode seasons in the last decade, when most shows get about 12 to 13. Marvel's even pushing it with 9, 6, hell, Echo got 5 episodes. To their credit, it's an understandable risk to take by not choosing Mighty Morphin. For as popular as the season Time Force is, it just doesn't have the same guarantee of success as the dinosaur-clad originals. We wouldn't want the show getting canceled, would we? Oh wait, I forgot the show's already off the air. Regardless, it affects how the franchise is handled in the future, if there even is a future for it. But enough of playing devil's advocate. What if I told you that you can do Mighty Morphin without making it Mighty Morphin?
On the monkey bars.
Try to take him alive.
Oh no, not again!
We're all sick of it. Mighty Morphin all over again. But are we really? Could it be that, as fans, we've made the association that Mighty Morphin equals poor quality? Well, if we have, it's because those running the show keep tackling it the same way instead of trying something different. Roping the Simpsons back into this, they're kind of famous for doing episodic resets of the status quo. In Power Rangers, they've devolved the show, doing a back to basics with every new incarnation. It's kind of reminiscent of that, a cheap way to recapture the magic without actually catering to the needs of a modern audience. Character writing without much substance started in Samurai, High School again in Megaforce, choosing dinosaurs, for obvious reasons, in Dino Charge, and bastardized generalizations of ninjas that have nothing to do with its Japanese origin, history, or folklore. An odd thing to repeat from the 90s in this day and age, but we'll get back to that later. There's a laundry list of things that the show's production have tried to do or emphasize in order to cater to Mighty Morphin, but they didn't have to do all this.
You're Jason, the Mighty Morphin Red Ranger.
If they want to use Mighty Morphin successfully, they need to go about it in a different way, and the closest we got was actually in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Once and Always, the 30th anniversary special on Netflix. So close, yet so far. Mind you, I thought it was far from perfect. Go check out my video on it, but the potential was certainly there. Psst, spoilers by the way, even though it's been out for a year. Once and Always, it for sure fell into the same pitfalls. Again, go watch my video, but what it did well, I wished it leaned into. There were hints of a more captivating storyline, understandable complications brought on at the start when Zach and Billy grapple with breaking the news of Trini's death to her daughter Min.
We have to tell her the truth, otherwise how's she gonna get closure? She's a kid. She's a kid, Billy!
This in turn leads to her understandable anger and desire to seek revenge. Expanding on that kind of dynamic, it was something that put her at odds with Billy, who tried to keep her out of it.
Look, the best thing that you can do for everyone is just to stay out of trouble and let us sort this out.
Says the guy who caused all this.
Pit the protagonists against each other in ways where both of them are justified in their actions, or at least make it so we understand where it comes from. There was a lot of shock in the fandom when the Once and Always trailer released and the characters dropped the word kill, and later on the special didn't shy away from using blatant words referring to death. The franchise usually avoids this at all costs, preferring to use the word destroy in its place. I'm pointing that out because it feels as if the writers believe that what's needed to elevate maturity is doing these small changes, using kill or having Billy impale Rita through the chest. Yet the strongest parts of the special were the aforementioned character dynamics and the sense of real consequence, except those aspects came second. Loss and grief is something Power Rangers has explored before, the sadness following death being seen when Cole finds out about his parents' untimely demise in Wild Force. Then there's anger born from grief, seen in Time Force, where Jen forms her whole motivation for traveling to the year 2001 off of her fiancé Alex's death. It even had a strong impact on the behavior of the Rangers in Lost Galaxy, acting more serious immediately following the death of Pink Ranger Kendricks.
Yeah! Not as much as it will cost you for not telling us. Ugh. Do you get my point?
We've had this kind of storytelling in non-Mighty Morphin seasons. It almost seems to add to the concept of Mighty Morphin Flanderization, mainly in that these concepts aren't exclusive to Wild Force, Time Force, and Lost Galaxy, but because this kind of writing didn't happen back in 1993, they're reluctant to take cues from it. It's like there's a fear to stray away from the 90s goofiness. There's still plenty of Mighty Morphinisms in the special, which I honestly wish they would have ditched. The reason I believe it's fear to do something else is that there's no way anyone on the show's production hasn't seen other media that treats itself with some sort of dignity. Yes, I know mandates and all that. While there's legitimate cause for concern, shaking away the identity of arguably the most recognizable first seasons of the show, there's no reason they still couldn't make a better product, Mighty Morphin or not. For a show with a very clear Japanese origin, it doesn't seem to want to commit when Japan is a big part of its theming. I'm talking about two iterations, Power Rangers Samurai and Ninja Steel, one that integrates quite a lot of Japanese elements, but without much substance. The other does what it can to suppress any and all references to Japan. This is all related to Flanderization in that times where the show can hard commit to doing something very off the wall, it fails to do so in service of making it generic Power Rangers. Power Rangers Samurai really only features the Japan-inspired theme as a consequence of following the script so closely, nearly beat for beat, but where it becomes generic is in the few changes it chooses to make. The characters themselves are Flanderizations of their counterparts. They made it so generic they didn't even bother casting an Asian, much less Japanese actor as the Red Ranger. I'm still reeling over Jaden Shiba. Really, anything that's Japanese is effectively aesthetic, dare I say a form of exoticism. Ninja Steel, on the other hand, doesn't bother with trying to fake embracing Japan. It's quite funny how they decided to do a ninja-themed season just a handful of years after Samurai, but they essentially take the aesthetic and get rid of all references to Japan. At least Samurai has the fake Japanese elements to fall back on, but if you get rid of the ninja stuff, the show looks as great value as Power Rangers can get. And sure, Mighty Morphin Season 3 and Ninja Storm also did this, but guess what? Ninja Steel came out in 2017, a year that relatively had more awareness of diversity and different cultures than the 90s and early 2000s. Both shows trade in their opportunity to give cultural exposure to its young audience who could stand to learn about the wider world in favor of, dare I say it, becoming more like Mighty Morphin, which itself didn't even make a huge deal of its dinosaur theming. This endless failure to attain Mighty Morphin-like success with a Mighty Morphin-like formula has led to a lot of these seasons feeling samey. There's a validity to the mentality that new seasons of Power Rangers suck, and old Power Rangers was better. I mean, that's the exact same as new Simpsons suck, old Simpsons is better. Take one of the worst episodes of The Simpsons, Lisa Goes Gaga.
I denounce thee! I denounce thee! I denounce thee! Whoa. Easy little monster.
And take that episode and make it every episode of the past 13 seasons, and there's your justification for that way of thinking. The show's hit its lowest point, but doesn't do anything new to get out of it, just repeats it over and over. In the last decade, more than that actually, we've had 6 iterations of the show, all split into 2 seasons except for the last one, split into 3. A total of 13 seasons that all feel the same. 9 of these seasons have had aliens for the main villains. 5 of these seasons have had an absent parent plot for the Red Ranger, 7 if you include Amelia. 9 have an annoying comedic duo, one of them being a carryover from Mighty Morphin, which started this trope. It's the checkboxes I mentioned. And I'm not saying repetition can't happen. In Space and RPM do the exact same missing sister turns out to be a villain, reforms, and then gets brainwashed back into being a villain plot. But when there's a pattern and little to no reasoning as to why it couldn't have been something different, especially back to back in some cases, it starts to make these shows blend together. It reminds me of how in the 90s and early 2000s, the toy packaging for many villain figures just said evil space alien, when half the time they weren't even aliens. While the toy line has long since moved on from that, and moved on from releasing toys at all, there no longer is any variety in the show, and as I pointed out, that includes the villains. You know, it was nice getting a mix of demons, mutants, and waste products wanting revenge. Besides Samurai and Beast Morphers, it's been so tiring to, year after year, rely on the same type of villain. It's getting harder and harder to buy that these guys are aliens, especially when some villains have non-alien designs. I don't think anything has felt more tacked on than the villains in Ninja Steel being part of an alien TV show and having these very distinct Japanese designs to them that very much clash with the alien aesthetic. The theme songs for the show refuse to let go of Go-Go Power Rangers, and I get it, it's our version of a marketable jingle, but it doesn't mean anything if the audience the choir sings to just doesn't care for it. To be fair, credit where it's due, they finally got rid of it for Cosmic Fury, and you can tell there's so much more oomph to it now. And while I was at Morphicon last month, I kept singing it non-stop with fellow YouTuber Connor the Waffle. Go watch my video on Power Morphicon if you haven't. The last thing that's made it feel samey isn't necessarily something from Mighty Morphin. I feel like at some point, they just decided that the Rangers had to have these annoying catchphrases and callouts.
Rangers together! Samurai forever! Earth's defenders never surrender! Rangers forever! Defenders together!
Rangers forever.
Defending together!
God, the secondhand embarrassment. They treat it like it's the Avengers Assemble of Power Rangers. Now, they've done it before, even in good seasons of the show, but it's always been sparingly, and mostly to call out products to buy at Toys R Us. That makes sense. I've always been partial to it, as in-universe it's kind of like using comms in a game of Overwatch or Fortnite. You're communicating what you're using, which helps your team out if they want a combo. But if I'm bringing it up, we all know there's some sort of aspect of it that I'm going to complain about, and it's that the show staff of Berenstein bears themselves into thinking this is some sort of cool thing that the Rangers have always done. We have catchphrases every time the Rangers defeat a monster of the day.
Mega Rangers, that's a mega win!
Imagine shouting a catchphrase or announcing victory every time you do something as mundane as taking a fat shit.
Check it out, Dad's on TV.
Dinosaur might, ready to fight! Yeah!
At least it was cool when they did it in Mystic Force when they said checkmate because of the chessboard cockpit, or at least Time Force's your time's up is a fun wordplay. In those cases, it felt procedural. Here it's forced and soulless. Now imagine that in almost every episode. Everything needs to be announced now, usually with some long drawn out name or phrase.
Dino Power Ultra Blaster, ready!
Even the most mundane actions get callouts. Dino Charge was the worst with this.
This, no problem for caveman strength! Take this! Raptor Slash! Power Slash! Dinomorph Blast! Dinomorph Blast!
Dinomorpher Blast!
Go Web, go!
It just takes me out, because when did they rehearse these? I'm already at the edge of my suspension of disbelief when they happen to know their morph calls. This is just pushing it. When did they learn to say this line in unison? They literally just got to the battlefield a minute ago. This is the kind of brain rot that happens when those working on the show don't care enough to trim all the fat. Stupid one-liners like this that the show had never had before just magically appear out of thin air.
Ninja, reveal!
A byproduct of Flanderization is that you've lowered your standards for something so low that you allow bad writing decisions to be made and they become harder and harder to get rid of. Bad choices become habit, and habits are hard to break. And I know I've been throwing the show's production team under the bus. It's well documented that those working directly on the show didn't like some of the decisions made. A lot of the blame is from the execs upstairs, but to some extent, there's enough fault in that there's plenty they could have fixed. Take this one line.
Toronto! Tricera! Terra! Z-Rex Blaster ready!
Just the line delivery is bad, not because they couldn't get the original Dino Thundercast to do ADR, but mispronouncing Tyranno? Like, who says Toronto like that? Like Tyrannosaurus? Sounds as if they were halfway to saying Serrano Pepper or Toronto, Canada. It's just hard for me to believe that no one in the sound booth caught that, or the editors, or the producers. And if you're wondering, the way they pronounce Tyrannosaurus with a New Zealand accent is only slightly different compared to an American one.
Auckland Museum has a second Tyrannosaurus Rex. Peter is being joined by Barbara.
They say Tyrannosaurus while us Americans say Tyrannosaurus, but they don't say Tyrannosaurus. And I don't want to keep hammering down, because for a lot of these people, a job's a job, but you also don't have to be a super fan of Power Rangers to turn out a product that isn't, frankly, slightly embarrassing. This might be a little mean, but it's kind of the truth. Again, all of this stems from poor decisions made up above by execs from Saban, later Hasbro, and maybe some from Nickelodeon. Those decisions forced the crew in New Zealand to adhere to strict guidelines that, in turn, breed more problems. If there's no passion from high up, that energy is matched down the ladder. This is the curse of the show chasing the high that is Mighty Morphin, and it's never gonna get that high again. At least not the way it's been handled. Add to that, they did this for years. It's the same mistakes over and over again. So there were two big reasons I made this video. First is that I had this absurdly long conversation with someone a few years back on my Discord server about how modern Power Rangers is Flanderization. The other person was saying that it wasn't Flanderization, which is fine, and went on this tiresome back and forth only for them to say they didn't understand what Flanderization was and gave no indication they knew. As frustrating as that conversation was, I'm more mind-boggled that someone would engage in discourse over a concept they self-admittedly said they didn't understand. That's what sparked my urge to write the script for this video. That conversation was nearly 2 years ago now, so I've been working on the script on and off since then, and this isn't the first time I've pulled video inspiration from a random talk I had on there. So please join my Discord server and hang out, the link's in the description. I promise the conversations aren't nearly this headache-inducing, but who knows, you might be the inspiration for my next video. Second, upon rewatching a particular episode of The Simpsons, Season 8's Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie, a lot of what happened in it really seemed to click with what's going on in Power Rangers. That episode really has nothing to do with Flanderization directly, but I believe it shows how it can happen. A quick synopsis. Executives are scrambling to recapture the attention of their target demographic, the children of Springfield, who have grown somewhat disinterested in the once popular Itchy and Scratchy show. Throughout the whole episode, it follows their attempts to boost ratings by introducing a new character, Poochie. Unfortunately, Poochie isn't well received, leading to the show's ratings tanking even lower. Now, if you swap out Poochie, the Cousin Oliver trope, it's pretty close to how Power Rangers has been handled. Instead of a new character, they're shoehorning Mighty Morphin instead. And the whole episode is at the expense of TV executives, showing them blatantly misinterpreting direct feedback from the kids in the focus group.
After so many years, the characters just can't have the same impact they once had.
This mirrors how outspoken Power Rangers fans have been for years. We only recently were heard with changes made to Cosmic Fury, and even then, it was but a tiny band-aid to cure a lost limb. Too soon? In fact, executives not knowing how to handle a show is such a common trope now, it makes me wonder how aware they are.
What's going on? Why don't they like it? We spent $250 million on this.
I'm afraid to say, wanting to do Mighty Morphin over and over again, that's here to stay. The fans want more than that. They want to see other seasons get love too, but we've also seen how non-Mighty Morphin merchandise shelf warms at stores. There's some truth in that, but it's all a problem created by executives in the first place by not pushing those seasons when they were at their prime and exacerbating certain ones over others. The longer we go from seasons like Time Force or RPM, the harder it is down the line to justify putting more effort into it. So I propose a compromise. Mighty Morphin is gonna happen again. Despite being tired of it, I'm willing to bet most fans would be okay if it went in the right direction. Don't just give us a show that's one-to-one with the 90s. It felt like Once and Always was trying to break free of that, but couldn't. Take Mighty Morphin and do something new with it. Give us compelling plots, make us care about the characters, produce a show that's competent and wouldn't be embarrassing to watch in the current year. Show that Power Rangers has more layers than what people can think of. Don't reduce it to the most basic idea. Take inspiration from other seasons for their quality, rather than using its most lucrative era as a blueprint. None of this is new. High-quality writing can be found in the show's massive back catalog outside of Mighty Morphin. Look at the Boom Studios comics. The writers there have shown how much they can elevate the franchise's storylines in ways they've never done before. Even though they've been doing Mighty Morphin, the comics have shown that they can go farther than what the show's attempted to do and failed at. There's respect in trying something new and elevating the show and taking it to new places it hasn't gone before. Dino Fury had a night theme on top of dinosaurs, but did nothing with it. The one upside of the franchise being shelved for the time being is that I feared the production process on the show in New Zealand had been Flanderized. Yeah, I'm using the term quite liberally at this point, and I've stopped bringing The Simpsons into this as heavily as I did in the first part, but when a television production has continued to work in the way it has for over a decade, it's harder to recover the quality lost than it is to cut corners or not pay attention to detail. Perhaps it's for the best to stop, so that if the show ever comes back, it can start on a clean slate. And I admit, it was certainly a stretch to use the next door neighbor Reno as a framing device to talk about the Ranger Renos, but I hope some of my comparisons and ideas weren't lost in the flanslation.
We should thank our lucky stars. They're still putting on a program of this caliber after so many years.
What else is on?